Welcome to Peak, a growth sport production that explores the power of culture on organizational performance. Music by The Edge. For show notes and more information, visit our website at growth-sport.com. Now here are your hosts, Mary Claire and Dr. Brian.
Welcome. I'm Mary Claire, and welcome to Peak, the official growth sport podcast. Brian, welcome back, sir.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I should say maybe welcome myself back because I
exactly. It's good to have you back.
There we go. Okay, so Brian, you kind of started a mini series last week on trying to help leaders understand and explore how do you get teammates to follow your initiatives.
Right.
Much of the sport framework is related to this. How do you get engagement, alignment, and accountability? But there's a deeper level journey that happens that we're touching upon as it relates to compliance, commitment, and then conversion. And so last week, you talked about getting teammates to simply comply and what that looks like. We can touch on that again briefly so folks get caught up. This week, we want to talk about how do we actually get them to feel and be committed to what it is, the vision that we're setting, the initiatives that we're setting. And then later in another episode, we'll talk about what it looks like to actually have teammates that are converted.
Right.
But let's kick it off. Remind us again, just a quick few sentences, what you spoke about last week as it relates to compliance, and then we'll move on to getting folks to be committed.
Yeah. So last week we talked about the ways to just get people moving down this path. And again, to your point, we want to move from being, compliant all the way to being converted. But starting with compliant, we said that there were three things that you needed to do in order to get people to move and to follow you. And if you're like me or most leaders, you've had that feeling where you feel like, man, I've been saying this over and over and over again, and I'm not getting people going where I want them to go. And in fact, sometimes I even mentioned that you probably have had this experience where you see some behavior and you say to yourself, wow, just not 10 minutes ago, we had this conversation, right? And it still didn't stick. So we talked about three things. One, telling them while it's necessary is not anywhere near sufficient. So I do need to tell them what I want them to do. But then I need to talk a little bit about the why. And the point we made here is that understanding the reasons behind the behavior will change behavior faster than just understanding the behavior itself. In other words, if I know the reasons, then I can better be motivated to do those things.
Yeah.
But even that's not sufficient. Ultimately, then I also have to model that behavior. I have to show people how to do it. And I have to remind them where and when it's appropriate to be doing that behavior by me doing that behavior. And we talked a little bit about how some leaders want to fix the front line, but they themselves don't want to do the behavior. And that will never work either. You need to, tell them, explain the why, and then model it and make sure that they can see that it's important to the leader as well as it is that the requirement that's being made at the front line.
I, as a leader, openly am bad at the why because either I jump over it, I intuitively know I need to model it. I intuitively or have been taught I need to say what it is, what the what is. But the why, I feel like it takes some level of mental or emotional energy for me to put down the why and then explain it.
Yep.
And also, I just want to get to the doing.
Yeah.
And so I struggle with the why personally. I know a couple other leaders that just want to start moving. So any tricks for us out there that want to jump over the why?
I think you just nailed it, which is you have to be intentional about the why, because like most leaders, and I'm very much like you, it's just like, let's go get stuff done.
Yeah.
Let's not waste our time trying to figure out the why, because in some ways it feels superfluous. It feels like you don't need to know why, just do it. It's that parental thing where the kid, you're like, why do I need to do this? Because I told you to. And, that works as well in a business as it does in a family. When you say that to your kids, because I told you to, and I know that doesn't work very well.
Nope,
and
not at
kids
all.
want to know why. And so do team members. They want to know why. So I think the answer to that really is for us to have a paradigm shift as leaders to say, I need to be intentional about the why, which, by the way, causes us also to think through, is this really what I need done? And is this really the right thing to do? And the why helps you get that support for doing that.
I think the structure too, I'm just verbally processing here, the structure, having a sport-like framework to think through the what, it forces the why, and it's a logical way for me to get to the why too. So
Yes,
frameworks help. I've realized.
it's a great point. Yeah, frameworks and process help as well, for sure.
Okay, so we've got people at least compliant. Sounds like my 3-year-old occasionally. I can't even get him compliant fully.
Right.
So we've got people compliant. How do we get them to be and feel committed? What does that mean? Why is it important? Why isn't compliance just good enough? Talk to us about committed.
So compliance at its root is motivated by fear. It's fear of consequence.
Yeah.
And if you even think about it with your 3-year-old, oftentimes the behavior is, I don't want to get mom mad. And so you do the behavior because you don't want that to be the outcome. And if you think about this, even with the people that we work with on our teams, even when you do everything right, you tell them, you explain why, you model it. Most of the time, if they're just compliant, if that's the motivation of just being compliant, it's kind of this idea that, well, it's what's being required of me. And if for some reason I don't do it, there will be consequences that are unfavorable and that I don't really want. So at its heart, to get people to move from compliant to committed, we have to change the motivation. And the motivation, the underlying motivation for committed is a trust-based, duty-based, it's the right thing to do, regardless of whether people are watching. And that's a nice way to think about the compliant versus committed. Compliant usually is doing the right thing when somebody's watching me. Committed is doing the right thing when nobody's watching me, because it's the right thing. So how do we get that shift from moving from compliant and fear-based to committed and more, honor, duty, it's the right thing based? And that's a little tricky for sure.
So how do we do it, Brian?
So here's what we have to do. First of all, you have to recognize that trust-based motivations are experiential. In other words, it has to be something that they've learned over time. It's impossible to go immediately to committed. If I've just met you, you're going to start at compliant because you don't know me. You don't know if you might get burned. You don't know what's going to happen with the results. And so you'll do it because the incentives are set up for you to be compliant. But to be committed requires us to have an interaction. It requires us to have a relationship. And the key point to this from a leadership standpoint is I have to be really careful that whatever I'm asking you to do leads to the results I promise will come from the behavior. Because if they don't, and especially if I'm not out in front of it in a way that helps you see what's going to happen, then you lose trust. Let me give you an example. Let's say I say to you, hey, I need you to show up at 6 a.m. every morning so that we can have a strategy meeting. And that strategy meeting is really important to our success. And you say, okay, I don't really want to do that. I got young kids at home. 6 a.m. is super early. This is going to be a hardship. So I'm not committed to this out of the gate because I don't know. I personally can't see the benefit of that. But I will do it because I'm compliant, because I say to you something like, if you don't do this, then I'll fire you and find someone else who will. Or maybe less severe, I say you probably won't be eligible for advancement in the company because I will have someone else show up and be part of that strategy meeting. So you come because you're compliant. Now, let's go all the way from worst case scenario to maybe some more nuanced scenarios. But let's say you show up at 6 a.m. and I'm not there, and neither is anyone else. How long are you going to keep doing that?
I'm not.
You're
There's
not.
No point.
One time, right?
Yep.
And if everyone's not there, then I've lost your trust. And the next time I say to you, hey, Mary Claire, I need you to show up at 6 a.m., what are you going to say?
Are you going to show up?
That's exactly right. You're going to go right down to that thing like, I'm not coming unless you're coming. So why don't you text me on your way? Yeah, when you're on your way, text me and then I'll leave, right? I mean, you can start to see that what happens is we get these obstacles, we get these are friction points in the following because of the trust-based factor here. So first first thing is I have to do what I say I'm going to do, and you have to start to build some trust. So let's say that we start showing up to these meetings and we all come to these meetings, then that part of the check, is the trust is checked. But let's say that you start to say to yourself, wow, I'm coming, everyone's coming, but these aren't really great strategy meetings. We just sort of waste time.
Yeah.
We don't really get much done, right?
Mhm.
I can't move you to committed to this because you're seeing no value from it. So even
Yeah.
if you keep coming, you're still coming because you're compliant.
Yep. Yeah.
So if I tell you this is going to be a fantastic strategy meeting, it needs to be a fantastic strategy meeting. You need to be able to come and say, it is what he
That was
said it
worth
was
it.
going to be. It's worth it, and I will continue to come. Here's the challenge, and we've talked about this before with respect to the nature of most of the people in an organization. You can divide them on a pretty nice bell curve where, you get 20% of the people who they'll come, they'll do no matter what you ask them to do. That's their personality. And then you've got another 20% on the other end of the spectrum that they just want to rebel. They don't want to come. They don't want to do whatever you say to do. And so they're going to always resist. I call those the resistors, right? So you have the adopters and then you have the resistors. The real opportunity and challenges with all the people in the middle, and I call these the waiters. These are people that want to see what is going to happen, and they may be compliant out of the chute, but they won't stay compliant long if you don't move them to committed. And the only way you move them to committed is for them to see on a recurring basis that what you ask them to do has value, that the following leads them someplace that is really worth going. So when you start to say things like, we need to do X in order to get Y, first of all, they say, do we do X? And then does it get us to Y? And this harkens back to our trust conversation.
It does,
Can I do what I said I'm going to do? And do I do what I say I'm going to do? And then do the results happen? And do I see those results? But that trust factor, adopting trust and making sure that we do what we say we're going to do as a leader, starts to bring people from compliant to committed. And that committed you can see by their willingness to start doing these behaviors, whether you're there or not.
Well, and this is one of the benefits. There are many benefits to that weekly game review meeting, but this is a sub benefit or like an ancillary. That process in and of itself moves people from compliance to committed because you have a built-in structure to build the trust.
Correct. The transparency comes back to our discussion about transparency as well.
Yeah.
You can't get people from compliant to committed unless they see and things are transparent and they trust.
Okay. Let's say I'm an organization that has a certain meeting. I don't mean to get into meetings here, but we've all been in meetings that are completely useless.
Right.
And the trust degrades, and then you see leadership not making decisions, making poor decisions. Where does one start?
This is a great question. I'm a big Rush fan. I don't know if any of the listeners know about the rock band Rush, but in one of the songs, they have a line that says, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice.
Yeah.
And, it's really interesting because just as we gain trust by doing what we say we're going to do, we also gain trust by stopping doing what's not working. And as a leader, making a decision in an intentional way to change a meeting or an engagement or something else that's not providing value in a counterintuitive way actually increases the trust that those who follow us have. Because what they say is, wow, if this is not going to be good or if this is not providing value, then the leader will make a change and won't keep requiring me to waste my time. So then if you think about this from the follower's perspective, if I have that kind of trust, let's say that you're the leader and I'm the follower and I'm coming to a meeting that I don't see the value of, I have the courage, because of the transparency and the humility of the leader, to ask the question, why are we doing this? What value are we getting from this? Is this doing what you thought it would do? And then if I feel like I'm going to get an honest answer from the leader that says, wow, no, it's not. Or yes, it is for these reasons. Either I get educated as to what is going on and why this is a productive meeting, or it stops and we
Yeah.
move on to something else.
Okay, Brian, we touched on what committed is. How do you get it? What happens if you don't have it? Where do you start? What does it look like when you have it? How does a leader know they have a team that's committed? What are they seeing?
So you certainly see, as we mentioned before, people doing the behavior even when they're not being closely watched and monitored. But you as a leader, I'm going to turn the question around and ask you. You're a CEO. You know the difference between a compliant team and a committed team. How does it feel? What does it look like?
Well, I can even speak about this in my own business now. It feels like when you are committed, there's a different level of intellectual and emotional engagement.
Yeah.
And it feels like things move. The image I get is that there's a leaning in as opposed to a sitting back. We may not be running, but we're moving. And there's a unison to it. There's an alignment to it. There's some engagement to it. So, I mean, ultimately, you're going to start to see some results, or some things are going to feel different or look different than they did before, which is often, I think, what you and I ask our clients: how are we going to look different at X period of time than we do now? So I would say that movement, there's a leaning in, there's an engagement, there's an energy.
I love that feeling. Yeah. I love what you're saying there. You know, in some ways you can think about this too. There's a difference between individual motion and collective motion.
Yeah.
I mean, we might individually be moving and not have it be enough to collectively move anything.
Yeah.
So we really need to get everybody moving in the same direction. We talk a ton about this in the methodology, rowing in the same direction, moving in the same direction. You start to see committed teams, you start to see collective motion, collective movement.
And it's as if, like, if individuals committed it and moving, they still have wind in their face because there's something, I'm mixing analogies or metaphors here, but like there's something dragging.
Yeah.
When the team is committed, it's like the wind is at your back and you're moving together forward, I feel like.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I like it a lot. Yep.
It is tough as an individual if you are committed and others around you are not. It's a drag. It's hard emotionally to have those meetings. That's a tough place to be if you're a teammate on a team that's not fully committed.
Great point.
And that's where, if you are bringing this sort of mindset to the leader, creating awareness and transparency of, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm feeling, here's what I think we can do about it.
If you move from compliant to committed, and you know this as a leader, it is like a breath of fresh air. It is like a huge change and transformation. I'll just tease this a little bit, but we're going to talk next time about moving from committed to converted, which is even a bigger blast of fresh air. But if you can get from compliant to committed, you're going to feel so much better about what you're trying to accomplish and where you're going.
Yeah. Well, Brian, any final words of wisdom? I always ask you this before we wind down.
I would say intuitively, every leader knows that this is where they want to go. But this is a very intentional step. It's not something that just happens naturally. It happens by you intentionally as a leader building the things we talked about before: transparency, trust, openness, humility, and then making sure that when you want to go places that you're very clear on getting there together, that you're modeling that, you're bringing them along, you're accomplishing that, you're building that trust.
And they're consistent about it, which
Correct.
is one of the hardest parts. It's often easy to start. It's hard to keep it consistent. So
well said. Yeah, well said.
Well, Brian, thanks for joining us today. And thank you to all of our listeners. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and follow us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, we hope your drive toward peak performance is successful. See you soon.
You've been listening to Peak, a Growth Sport production.